by world-renowned geopolitical and economic strategist who wears many hats. He is an internationally best-selling author of 7 books, Dr. Parag Khanna, who's also the founder and CEO of AlphaGeo, the leading AI platform for geographical analysis. Thank you, Parag Khanna, for joining me on the News Hour tonight. I want to ask you, winds of change, the right wing, so to speak, taking over in many countries, United States, India, Israel, Italy. How do you see this phenomenon? Is this about strengthening of democracy, which in most of these countries was, really stated as if it was on the verge of a crack up or something?
Depends on how you view it. A lot of people view the rise of far-right nationalist and populist parties as potentially spelling the end of effective democracy in many places, given the illiberal platforms that these parties have. At the same time, history shows that it's very cyclical. Populist parties get voted in, and then they get voted out. And ultimately, they are judged on their competence, their effectiveness, their ability to govern in a way that satisfies the needs of the people. So the best way to approach this is not to view it as a global wave, but to see whether or not the Italian government survives, what happens with, of course, with the British government. You now have a centrist left, Labour Party in power. In Germany, clearly, with an election coming up, and Germany is a very important country, you will probably have a status quo. So I think that really varies country by country. As to the United States, it does look like, the MAGA movement is quite ascendant, and the Democrats will be in disrepair for quite a while.
So, Mr. Parag Khanna, you've also said many democracies choose leaders with illiberal tendencies. What does this mean for democracy in America?
Well, they have elected a leader with illiberal tendencies. However, again, you have checks and balances. It's a constitutional system, of course. You have other centers of power. No doubt President Trump is already planning to support Republican candidates in the midterm elections. He's certainly maneuvering to ensure that justices that are favorable to his agenda stack the Supreme Court and these kinds of things. He will be releasing about 1,000, apparently, executive orders in the coming hours and weeks. So his agenda is going to hold sway. There will be, of course, some counterbalance to that. But, the proof is really in what gets executed or not. What we've witnessed over the past 20 years in America is that whether the agenda is viewed as far right or far left, it faces bureaucratic obstacles, societal obstacles, fiscal obstacles, and so forth. So let's not presume that his agenda will experience a straight line from his mind, from his vision, to reality.
So let me ask you, what do you think about his controversial claims about Greenland, Panama Canal, Canada? What do you make? Is this a message about U.S. dominance and nothing more than that?
I think that some of these things have been brewing for a while. There's historical antecedents in terms of the U.S. desire or coveting of Greenland. Of course, there's historical tension, but also cooperation with Panama. The United States is waking up to what I call the supply chain tug of war between the United States and China. It wants to ensure that China does not control critical minerals, that it does not control trade choke points like ports and canals. And so wherever it sees an opportunity to do so, to reassert influence, it will do so. And of course, the Panama Canal is in the Western Hemisphere. It used to be controlled by the United States. Greenland is in the Western Hemisphere. Trump offered in his first administration to purchase it. More than 15 years ago, I argued that Greenland would become an independent country because of climate change, and that it could join a North American Union, which is actually the natural home of Greenland. So if we put aside for a moment Trump's notion of acquiring it, seizing it, subjugating it, and making it a state of America, and view it more as a process of Denmark letting go and Greenland becoming independent and becoming a strategic natural ally of Western powers in general and North America in particular, to help to control trade routes, and to access its critical minerals. That is a more pragmatic, rational, and emotionally balanced way of framing what's going on.
But do you think that's likely to happen?
I actually think that the Danish government has realized, at least from their own statements, without having to do too much interpretation, their own statements say it's up to the Greenland people. And the Greenland people have been incrementally leaning in the direction of self-governance, even independence, for some time. They have been dependent fiscally on huge subsidies from Denmark, but that money is very, very easily substituted by grants, loans, aid, and of course investment from Western powers, particularly the United States. So I do think that the time has probably come for Greenland to join the United Nations.
Okay. And do you think President Donald Trump is going to push the envelope on this one sooner than later? Do you see a time frame in mind?
I don't. These things depend on bottom-up as well as top-down. He has many issues on his plate. He wants to resolve the Russia-Ukraine war. He wants to ensure that he gets off on the right foot with Xi Jinping of China. And of course, he has to deal with the Houthi rebels in Yemen and the Israel-Palestine-Gaza situation. And then there are these, call them projects, like Greenland, which are important but not urgent, as it were. So I do think that there is a lot of energy, fervor, enthusiasm coming out of the gates, as you fully expect from an administration like his that knows the ropes. He's obviously been in the White House before. They've been preparing for this. But I really wouldn't put Greenland at the absolute top of the agenda right now.
So, Dr. Parag Khanna, let me also ask you, how do you see the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas? Thanks to Donald Trump, or was this in the making? Because you're somebody who's advised governments on the Middle East as well. How do you see this?
No, this was obviously in the making. This has been a war of attrition, perhaps one-sided, in which, of course, Israel's campaign has really ground down Hamas, certainly the Palestinian people, tragically, in Gaza. There's only so much more pain, punishment, that can be inflicted. And of course, the negotiations over the hostage release, conditional upon the ceasefire and vice versa, have been in negotiation for a while. It's not a coincidence, of course, that it's happened on the eve of Donald Trump's inauguration. But if you're asking the most important question, which is, will it be abided by Israel, I think the question is, it's really too soon to tell. There is a micro politics there in terms of whether Hamas still has capacity, how many hostages may or may not remain, how many Palestinian hostages are released, what rights Palestinians have to remain and to rebuild Gaza, if at all. All of those smaller questions are going to give us the answer to the fate of Gaza, more so than anything else.
Well, let me then also ask you about India in the context of the world as we're seeing unfolding right before our eyes. If you say President Donald Trump is going to look at his relationship with Xi very closely, where does that leave India? What would be the future of India's strategic ties with the US on the one hand, China, Russia, looking at the varied interests and multi-alignment, as you call it, for India and its future?
That's exactly right. India has been shrewdly practicing multi-alignment for a couple of decades now, and I give India a lot of credit for the way in which it's handled its own rise as a great power and managing relations with China, its immediate neighbor and rival, of course, Pakistan, but most significantly in terms of major powers, United States and Russia. It has been getting what it wants to a large degree from major powers. Let's not forget that Europe has been so interested in deepening ties economically and strategically with India as well. And of course, with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it was quite a shock to the United States and Western powers that India did not, quote unquote, play along with Western sanctions, but instead has not quite embraced, but you might say accommodated Russia quite significantly due to their energy ties and so forth. So India is acting in its own interest as it should. It is managing to curtail Chinese adventurism geopolitically in the border standoff region. India standing up to China on the border has been a very important case study for many other countries who are learning how to navigate China as it gets larger and more aggressive. So I think that India is doing the right things. It should be very cautious about any administration anywhere. And I think that that is going to continue to be the policy of India.
Let me also ask you, the elephant in the room is also about Indians in the United States, and President Trump has been extremely vocal about the fact that jobs should be for the Americans. There is a lot of Indian community present in America. Should they be worried today? Because originally, of course, it has been said that only illegal immigrants need to worry. But how do you see the trouble or the possibilities sitting out there for the Indian community in America?
Yeah. This is, of course, a perennial source of concern. There are times when the H-1B visa quota is expanded significantly, but there are times when it's curtailed because of policy, because of politics, because of bureaucracy, because of COVID. This is an issue that has its ups and its downs. Right now, the challenge is that the U.S. is actually near full employment, and yet still there is a major shortage of skilled labor in the country, and therefore there is a need to expand immigration in the technological sphere. The common ground, if there is going to be a middle ground between the factions of the Republican Party, the MAGA faction that rejects immigration and the tech faction that, of course, deserves a huge amount of credit for getting Donald Trump elected, that wants to see more immigration, that will have to be resolved in favor of a streamlined, less bureaucratic, more transparent, and merit-based process in which if companies genuinely demonstrate that the workers that they're bringing in, A, are more qualified than Americans to do those jobs, and, all things equal, they probably are, but B, are getting paid the appropriate wages so that one can prove that it's not a job that an American would not have taken. If those conditions are satisfied, then I think that the volume of H-1B or other tech program visas will continue. And that is a price that will have to be borne by the tech companies. And I think that for them is a small price to pay. It's the right thing to do. And if they do it, to be clear, it will enhance the status of Asian Americans, particularly Indians, in America, because then they will earn more, higher salaries and be higher status members of American society.
Do you still stick with your prophecy in your book, Move the Book, that India's diaspora will become much larger in the coming years and the future is brownish? Do you stand by that?
Well, it's becoming more and more true by the day, of course. If you take the South Asian diasporas as a whole, ourselves and our neighbors, India's neighbors, it's already, of course, by far, the largest diaspora in the entire world. India's diaspora alone is certainly more global, more distributed than the Chinese diaspora. The Chinese diaspora, half of which is in Southeast Asia. The Indian diaspora is literally in every country in the world. Indians, of course, also assimilate just about everywhere better than any other diaspora group, with some peers like perhaps Lebanese or Filipinos, but Indians really are first rate at assimilation. I have grown up in India, in the Middle East, in the United States, in Germany. Especially when I go back to Germany, I'm blown away at how many Indians, I see there that are taking citizenship, that are learning the language and so forth. So I think that already effectively, you might say the Indian diaspora is on the cusp of numerically being the largest, but it already more or less is, and it's certainly becoming the most influential. And we're really at the only early stages of that process because India's demographics are so young. So there really is a global India and global Indians, and I just hope that the relationship within the diaspora with India remain very strong and become even more effective and efficient.
Let me, in the end, ask you about the future of President Donald Trump's presidency, the next 4 years, and the role of people like Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, the Department of Government Efficiency.
Well, there is a dire need for government restructuring, that's for sure. This one particular agency will make recommendations like others. Quite frankly, every idea they have has been articulated before from within the government itself, so there's not necessarily anything new there. Getting things done is the messy game of politics, but Trump does speak about his mandate, and he's obviously quite serious about it. So I think that we'll see a lot of changes internally in the structure of the executive branch in the federal government. We'll probably see a lot of changes externally in foreign policy. But the really irreversible trend potentially is, of course, the role of the private sector and the way in which the public and private sectors are so explicitly coordinating with each other around market design for cryptocurrencies, around how to regulate technology. These kinds of things, we will probably see less adversarial interactions between the White House and Silicon Valley and more collaborative ones. Generally speaking, I think that is a good thing. Again, every nation is engaged in a tug of war over supply chains, technology, superiority in the commercial domain. No country can win unless the public, private, technology spheres collaborate actively and successfully with each other. And America is waking up to that, and it's going to fight in that tug of war, just like India does and China does and other countries do.
Well, on that note, the next 4 years, if you were to describe it and give it a headline, you're an author, how would you headline it?
It's going to be unpredictable.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Khanna, for joining me right here on NewsHour. Times Now, extremely thankful for your participation and your view into what America is going to look like over the next few years.
Thank you. Pleasure.